Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our community conversation. I'm Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee, and every Wednesday evening we're here at 7 o'clock talking about things that are really important to the state of Rhode Island and all 39 cities and towns. Tonight's no different. We've got many members of the General Assembly, the Rhode Island General Assembly, both the Senate side and the House side, just to kind of walk through what's happening and the impact that this virus has had on them and has had on their constituents. So, stay tuned, because I think that you're going to see hear some from really good leaders in the state that, are ready ready to get back to work. And we got to really make that happen. And, so as quickly as we can. And the way we're going to do that is wear our masks and stay safe. Make sure that, make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our community safe. And, the theme that I've got for this year is, look, we want to stay positive in Rhode Island. We want to test negative in 2021. So thanks for being here tonight. Things that we continue to talk about, which I've mentioned, and I continue to invite people to come in on that discussion. Right now, our schools are doing everything they possibly can to make sure that we're educating the young kids, young boys and girls in the state. But it doesn't matter whether you're a high income, a low income, moderate income. It doesn't matter whether you're in a private school or a public school or a charter school. It doesn't matter if you're a state resident that's going out of state to school that's in those K through 12 grades. There is hundreds and hundreds of hours of learning time that's being lost. And again, at no fault of our districts. Our school teachers in our districts are working, around the clock to do the best they can. But the virtual learning and the other, hybrids that are out there, we know we know that they're losing learning time. So I'm very interested in, exploring and doing the things that I did in town of Cumberland when I was a mayor. We opened up a mayor's office, education department, and we do 52 weeks out of the year of reading and math and science and different types of music and art for pre-K all the way through high school. And it's a way that you can kind of plan and can be intentional in every community to kind of, provide those extra learning hours with retired teachers, underemployed teachers, current teachers that actually help our, young people learn in a way that they're going to need. Because if we don't do that, the incomes and the futures of the students are going to be impacted. This COVID-19 is impacting many of our lives, and it's going to impact the long-term lives of our students. And also the communities and the families are going to get impacted. And of course, the state of Rhode Island is, and our goal is to make the state of Rhode Island the best place we can for everybody that lives in the state. So I'll leave it at that. I know that there's much to be said. We know that there's a little bit of change in the landscape in Rhode Island, and with the Governor Raimondo accepting the nomination for an appointment for the Commerce Secretary with the new President Biden. Biden will be sworn in January 20th. That's, at that point, our rules elevate the Lieutenant Governor to the governor's seat. So, there are some things that have happened, but we really thank the governor. And I do want to just echo this, is that for someone from Rhode Island, a governor, it's really a source of pride for everybody that lives in our state to have a governor that's appointed to a cabinet position with the President of the United States. I mean, I think that's something we're celebrating. I think it's a real good thing that we should really be, really happy about. And I think it's going to be good for Rhode Island. And I just wanted to point that out. But this show here was actually scheduled prior to that happening. So tonight I'm on a learning curve with our reps and senators to talk to them directly now as a governor to be through, if that nomination is approved and confirmed by the U.S. Senate, and all the indications are that that's what's going to happen. So Ben, let's bring on our guests, and we can have them help. I can introduce them, and they can help introduce themselves and talk about this past year. I mean, this past year has been unbelievable. Rep. Edwards, thank you for being here. And Senator Pearson from my hometown of Cumberland. By the way, I'm a little partial to Cumberland. Everybody can have their own. I give 2 thumbs up when we get somebody from when I talk to somebody from Cumberland. That's good. And Chairman Abney's here with us as well, and Chairwoman Pat Sherper here as well, and Senator Palmer here, who's going to also chair a committee on the Senate side. So why don't I just start with Jay and introduce yourself, Jay? Give the little overview. You're down in the little Compton area, the Tiverton area, and let people know where you're from and what you're serving, and then add in a little bit about what this last year has meant to you personally and professionally in the both as a rep, but also you all have originally there's jobs out there. People are doing work outside of the General Assembly. So welcome, Jay, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Governor. I really appreciate it. I actually represent Tiverton and Portsmouth, God's country, as I like to say it, the best part of the state. I know you love Cumberland, Governor, but I love the East Bay, and I am fortunate to represent the most beautiful district in the entire state. And the chairman, I'm sure, agrees. I've been in government in some one way or another for 24 years. I've been elected for 14. I was in the Tiverton Town Council for a couple of years, and I've been in the General Assembly for the past 12 years, 7 years as the whip. I was appointed before that. I was on zoning board in Tiverton and a bunch of different committees. I am in my day job. I am a construction project manager for a Providence construction firm, site specific, and we were deemed by the governor during the pandemic to be essential. So we never stopped working. I've had a number of my people, subcontractors, employees, crews have contracted COVID over the course of the pandemic. So we've been dealing, it is going on even today. We have jobs we occasionally have to shut down because we've had people infected with the COVID, and we've been dealing with that off and on. But we've come up with a number of ways to keep our people safe, and we continue to do that on our local level. I have 3 kids. I have 2 grandchildren. I have one that came just last week. So happy. Sloan Marie Edwards just entered the world last Wednesday. So the Edwards clan is extremely happy about that. And despite all the problems we've had with the pandemic, there are little blessings that come out. So
there you go.
That about sums it up, Governor.
Yeah, that's great. Good introduction. I'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll get back to some of the work that you're doing in the General Assembly and the impact that the COVID has had on that work. Chairman Ryan Pearson, new chairman of the Budget Committee on the Senate side, and a neighbor of mine here in Cumberland. So, what's nice about the Rhode Island, 39 cities and towns, we've got multiple communities represented right here tonight that we're all, proud of how those communities make up the state of Rhode Island. But Ryan, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Governor, and thanks for hosting this tonight. It's great to get an opportunity to talk with some Rhode Islanders and talk about some of the work we do in the Assembly. As brief background, as the Governor mentioned, I represent Cumberland and Lincoln in the Rhode Island Senate. I've been there for 8 years and have really enjoyed it. And, it's kind of ironic. One of the questions we had is what got us to run and what was one of the first things. And actually dates back to CHS 2010, Governor. When the governor was mayor, we worked together on a school construction project in Cumberland to retain the accreditation of our school, and that really sparked me to get involved. Ended up on the school committee, ended up running for the state senate. One of the first things I took on in the state senate was lifting the moratorium that we had on school construction, and so it's an interesting sort of full circle as we sit here tonight. But as the governor mentioned, I've taken on a new role now as the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. And, I'm really excited about being able to work with the governor, work with Chairman Abney and all of our colleagues in the House and the Senate to really pull together a budget that not only cares for our Rhode Islanders and our businesses today during this pandemic, but really lays the groundwork and the foundation to invest in them in the future. And I know that we all share a lot of goals to do that. And I think from this pandemic, thinking across the last year, I think if you would have told any of us that, we would be, everyone would become a WebEx and Zoom expert, the day that I thought Senate President the day that I thought that everyone would become a WebEx and Zoom expert was not 2020. But here we are. And I think, the adaptation of Rhode Islanders all across the state, of our businesses, to figure out how to make things work in this pandemic has really been remarkable. And as we look towards 2021 and a positive attitude, as the governor said, heading out on the other side, what can we learn, right? Society has advanced, technology has advanced, everyone has moved on a bit further than we probably would have in our day-to-day lives. And so as we come out the other side of this, really, how can we make sure that we're setting up Rhode Island to take advantage of that, and setting up all of our businesses to really move forward? And so we'll get through this, but excited to be here today. And Governor, again, I want to thank you for hosting the forum today.
Yeah, and Ryan, you were polite by not saying you were a high school student when we actually got together talking about improving the high school. So, yes, thank you for that. Thank you for holding that. But full disclosure. But we did a pretty good job. We ended up putting over $40 million into that school, into that campus, and we're pretty proud of it right now. So not only we work as a high school student at the time, but also in terms on the school committee when you were there. So that's a good thing for the town of Cumberland, and our schools are really important, and I always felt that way. So, Chairman Abney, please introduce yourself from down there in Newport, and Chairman of our Finance Committee.
Thank you very much, Governor. I would like to disagree with my good friend Jay Edwards. I think Newport and Middletown is God's country, actually. I know it's nice up where he is. My in-laws used to live out in Portsmouth, but it's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. I'm so pleased to be able to represent Newport and Middletown. Newport is where my wife was born and raised. I had two kids two boys initially, who were both born in the Navy hospital when the Navy hospital was functioning. I'm a retired military major. My formative years was in the military, where I got a chance to serve all over the world on worldwide assignments. I lived in 11 different cities in this country, and I worked and lived in 8 different countries with NATO for quite a long time. So I learned a lot about how to come to consensus on things. I was elected in 2012, began serving in 2013, and then I think it was 2016, I became chairman of the House Finance Committee, and my hair used to be all dark, but it's starting to turn gray. So it's crazy. It changes you a little bit. In fact, I used to look like Jay Edwards before I became chair, but now look at me. So you get changed around a lot. But it's been a good ride so far. The most important thing is that I did do some service. I came to Rhode Island in about 1996, but I served on the Newport Zoning Board of Review. So I learned a lot about how cities and towns work. I also learned how hard it is to convince people to vote for you when you work from here. But I overcame those barriers. And I think the experience of living abroad and working, just have a never give up attitude. As I said, my wife is from here. We've got 2 boys, a girl, and 4 granddaughters. One of them is in the Marines out in San Diego. And then I have a son who's a major. He's the same rank now that I was when I retired, but he's a West Point graduate, went to school right here in Rhode Island. So I think I'm very proud of for him. And then finally, I don't think that what I've always been taught, always hang around people who are smarter than you so you can learn something. So I've joined 2 national organizations, the Council of State Governments, where I'm also the co-chair of their finance committee. And I also co-chair a budget and revenue committee and state and local taxation committee on the Council of State Legislators. So I do that so that I can bring information back home to help me understand the bigger picture of what we're doing when we talk about finances. So I really appreciate the opportunity. This virus has changed. I usually like to get onto the grocery stores and shake hands and hug people, but I can't do that now. And that's really, it really has changed my perspective of how you deal with constituents, and so I'm learning to work through that at this point. It's good.
Yeah. So Chairman, I don't want to get in the middle of the battle between you and Jay, but this world is a different one. Our daughter worked in the finance, lived in Boston, working in Framingham, but now they're all virtual, probably through the rest of the year. So where does she select to move to kind of enjoy herself? So she's down in Newport right now, and actually we're spending more time down there. We're visiting Kara. So I just want to let you know that Kara seemed to think Newport was a good spot to go, and she's a sharp kid, so I can't disagree with her. So, but yeah, and then both of you, both Chairman Pearson and Chairman Adney, we're going to be working together because last week I learned that if there is a confirmation, which we believe there's going to be for the governor, that I'll be submitting the budget. My office as governor will be submitting the budget. So we're going to really be talking to both of you, chairman, just to get up to speed and making sure that what we provide to you is a workable document. And I did that as a mayor to make sure that I was working with my council to make sure what I presented was a workable document that gets changed and adjusted. But I think that's the plan. So we'll be calling you. Don't give me a cell number because I'll be banging on that number.
No, I won't.
We're excited to work with you.
Yeah. Chairman Serpa, Pat, please introduce yourself down there in the West Warwick area, right? And part of Coventry as well. So we're hitting all the communities here. Tonight we'll probably hit probably 8 or 9 or 10 of our communities. I always like to count the communities.
Absolutely.
Please introduce yourself, Pat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Serpa, and I represent District 27, which is mostly West Warwick, but I do have little snippets of Warwick and Coventry, and I can settle the argument for once and for all this evening. It's irrefutable. West Warwick is the geographical center of Rhode Island. It's irrefutable. Look at the map, and here we are. So everything begins and ends in West Warwick.
I'm glad I started this.
Right.
Yes.
We lost that.
Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Governor. Go ahead. Oh, you
No, go ahead, Pat. That's good. I thought we lost you for a second, but
no,
please.
I'm here. I just wanted to tell folks a little bit about myself. I am going into my 16th year, my 8th term in the General Assembly. And I tell everybody it's the worst paying job I ever had, but it's the best job I ever had. I love my job. For 6 years before this, I was a member of the West Warwick School Committee. And in my real life, I was a teacher and a guidance counselor in West Warwick. And that was certainly a job that enriched my life. In fact, many of my students are now constituents. So it's good to see them and, frankly, their children, and in some cases, their grandchildren. But that's okay. They're all constituents, and I make sure they vote. So I've enjoyed this job. And one thing I learned about this pandemic being shut in, I know we've been criticized quite a bit, and I'm sure my colleagues heard the same thing. You were all at home doing nothing. I don't know about you folks, but during this pandemic and during this shut-in period, my constituents had many, many, many needs, probably more needs than I experienced all year. And I was so honored that they thought to call me, ask for assistance, ask for direction. And I didn't have all the answers, but in every single case, I was able to provide them some direction, some answers so that they could resolve their problems. And that was the very best part of being shut in. And I have to say, it really gave me a chance to know on a much more and I'll use the word intimate, but you know what I mean, intimate basis of my constituents, being able to give them what they needed and answering their pleas for help. And, I was a last resort in some cases. They didn't know where to return. And in some cases, I was honored that I was their first resort. So, to all of those naysayers who said we were at home doing nothing, I can say in my case, I have documented every name, address, and phone number, and I have pages and pages and pages of constituents I help. So if there's some good that came out of this shut-in period, I'd say it was that. And then just to wrap up, I'm the mother of an adult son, and I have a 3.5-year-old grandson named Gabriel, who is the apple of my eye. I certainly adore him, and I'm happy to say he adores me. And During this pandemic period, I've been very careful because I do have a 76-year-old husband here home with me who is in compromised health. And I have a 96-year-old mother living with me who is in fantastic health. So I certainly want to keep her safe. I want her to live to at least 100. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And you know, my mom is 92, so she's a youngster compared to your mom.
Yes.
And but she's living with us as well, Pat. And you know, we're being very careful with her, and they're a blessing to have. And what you're talking about there too is, you know, I think it's absolutely true. Our reps and our senators were you know, really relied on a great deal more than what we were hearing because you weren't in session. So there were, but the fact of the matter is, whether you're in session or not in session, the people that, you know, are in your district rely on you, and they rely on reps and senators, and you play a real important role. And I know that to be true because I've been in all the communities, and I know that you know, when I got to the West Warwick area, your name was mentioned many times.
Nice
all our reps and senators are. So
nice to
thanks for that leadership and during this time.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you, Chairman DePalma. Lou, yeah, Lou's with us, and Lou has been you know, actively involved with a lot of the small business issues that we've been working on, and he's been on many of these calls. So Lou, welcome, and give us a little introduction and a little bit about your family. I think there's a little competition going on here in grandkids right now, so you know, I'm sure you're going to get into that.
I'll do that. First of all, Governor, congratulations. Looking forward to supporting you as you move forward to your next endeavor here. But like Marvin, I'm not from here. I came here in 1983, and during my day job, I work at Raytheon. And as Jay mentioned earlier, we've been essential workers. So I've been at Raytheon. I'm in my 38th year. I'm a chief engineer for our undersea systems business area, where I've been since September 1st of 83. Love the people, love the work, love where I live, all those kinds of things. And look, it's a great place to be. Been in the General Assembly now for, Jay and I got elected the same year, in 2008. So I've been there for 12 years. Just began my 13th year, the 7th term in the General Assembly. I served with my good colleague and office mate before, Senator Pearson. On the first vice chair of the Senate Finance Committee, just became chair, and will be working with my colleague here, Rep. Serpa, chair of the Rules, Ethics, and most importantly, Oversight, which we'll talk about later, Oversight Committee. Previously to that, I served on the Middletown Town Council for 4 years, and were involved in, I think we all came from building stuff. I was involved for a bunch of years with the school facilities building approach that the school system had. So let's talk about grandchildren. Prior to the pandemic, I had 3 boys. I have 2 daughters, I had 3 boys. Now we're still into the pandemic. 2 granddaughters born during the pandemic, 1 in May, 1 in December. So I think I got the number. I got 5. I'm assuming we're going to start the other hand. And the fortunate part about it is having raised 2 daughters, both married, one with three children, 2 boys and a girl. The other one with 1 boy and a girl. They live 150 yards from where we do. So we see them, our pod, well, it's not 5. Our pod is a pod of 11. We see each other every day because we're watching them, taking care of them each and every day. So it is a true honor to serve, as has been said. And the one piece I also want to mention is the work in the private industry, the work in public. They both have to complement each other. I've seen that. What I've learned on the private side, I've been able to use on the public side. What I've learned on the public side, I've been able to use to work on the private side, and it's I think it's been invaluable. So, Governor, again, congratulations, and glad to be here to support the community conversation. Did we lose? And I should say, District 12, best district in the state. It's Middletown, it's Newport, it's Little Compton, and it's different. So we got the bridge. Oh, there's no more toll on the bridge.
Hey everybody, we did lose the Lieutenant Governor for a second, so he is back on now.
I'm back on. I'm on like Rep. Serpa. I went with my phone because this is unusual that I keep on getting bumped off. But I hope this is not a sign of things to come.
No, no.
Governor, you missed it. District 12 is the best district. It's Middletown, Newport, Little Compton, and Tiverton. So it's that bridge between the four.
Well, again, thank you all for being here, introducing yourself. And now we're going to try to, make some, talk a little bit about the General Assembly and bring, I think, the two chairmen of the Finance Committee on first. Ben, is that the plan, Ben?
Yes. So we are going to start with Rep Edwards for the
Yes.
Yes. So we're
Legislative
gonna
issues.
yes, part one, legislative issues. So we will get back to everybody else in just a second.
Okay. Beautiful. So, Rep, thank you for again for being here. And we'd like to just talk a little bit about some of the. I know you're here on behalf of our new speaker, Joe Sacacci, and representing the General Assembly on his behalf tonight. I did get to speak with him twice in the last week, especially as the news of breaking on the Commerce Secretary position in D.C. for Governor Raimondo, and I'm looking forward to continue working. But what's on the horizon, in your opinion, in the General Assembly? I know you've been a very active rep for many years. So what do you see happening there right now in terms of the next session, which is going to open up officially last week, right? And then you're going to open up next week, I think. So
Yeah, we're going to come back on the 19th is our first general session. On our end, I know that everything is going to be pretty much everything COVID. It's going to be COVID or COVID related or COVID created. One of the things we're going to look at first is COVID relief for our small businesses. We're also going to take up a possible increase in the taxes for high wage earners, because as everyone is probably aware, the state is going to be facing a huge potential $500 million deficit in the coming year. So we're going to have to come up with some creative ways to either increase taxes or do some severe cuts. So that's one of the things that we're definitely looking at. In keeping with our neighbors to the north, we're going to look at increasing our minimum wage because Massachusetts is going to be right now very much ahead of us. We're also going to be looking at recreational marijuana and the taxation we'll be able to derive from that. A big thing for all the members in the House that we've been talking about a lot has been affordable housing, both low income and making just general housing affordable for the people who work in our communities. We find that the teachers, firemen, the police, the people who serve our communities can't afford to live in our communities because of the housing costs. Definitely going to be looking on fairness for the vaccines. I know you mentioned earlier we were talking about you possibly getting vaccines for the members of the General Assembly and our government people so we can go back to work. An issue that's been very much in my court has been the opioid epidemic. During the pandemic, the rate of deaths has increased to over 400 in the last year, which means we have over a person basically dying, more than one person dying every single day in the state of Rhode Island from an opioid epidemic. I've worked a lot with Senator Josh Miller on some legislation. We got a bill last year that we put in to create what they call, I call them safe injection zones. They have it probably no harm zones where people can go use their IV drugs, and they have the ability, if they have an overdose, there's people right there who can save them. They give them the Narcan. And there's also the opportunity for people to talk to them about getting into treatment and to make sure that they're using clean needles and that they, again, don't have an overdose, so we can actually save lives. We have, like I said before, we have a large potential, as determined by RIPEC, we have a very large potential budget deficit in the coming year. And one of the things that's it's encouraging, both the speaker and the leader on the House side have been telling us, is that with the new administration, we have a Democrat in the presidency. We have President-elect Biden coming in. We have a new democratically controlled Senate, and we have the democratically controlled House. So we're looking to possibly close some of this gap, if we can, for more federal dollars. That'll actually be a boon to the state, and it'll allow us to not have to do the deep cuts that are potentially out there. So that sums up.
Yeah.
There's enough there on the House side.
Yeah. Tell us what the how you gonna function at this point in time if you come back. What does that physically look like? Is all 75 reps coming into the chambers? What are you going to be meeting in the meeting rooms and the hearing rooms? What is it going to look like physically, Jay?
Well, our Rules Committee was the only committee right now that the Speaker has appointed, and he's done that specifically so we can revise our rules to meet the issues that we're facing with the pandemic right now. We have been, as a body, we have been meeting in the Veterans Auditorium. It'll fit 600 some odd people. There's been only 75 members plus some staff, so we're able to socially distance and keep our masks on and keep our people protected, as opposed to going back in the room like we did last summer when we had the plexiglass everywhere and we had a third of the House in the room. And then we had people in various rooms throughout the building coming in and out to vote, and we had everything televised. We're anticipating right now having a lot of our committee hearings remote, allowing people to testify remotely. I am on House Finance and on House Oversight, and we have had very good success with both of those committees testifying remotely. It's been good for to keep the people safe. It's also been good, I think, to get people to be able to come in and testify. We have not had a lot of public testimony. We've had mostly the administration because we've been dealing with the budget and the increase in the budget. But I see us doing a lot more, probably remotely, allowing remote votes for the reps, and allowing us to possibly move around the state if we have to find different venues.
Yeah, so that's a different experience. And then what as you mentioned, you're going to try to help the people who want to participate, on virtual strategies. And is that so if you were talking to somebody right now and say they either wanted to speak about something that it might be pending, like the legislation you talked about, the multiple legislations, whether it's housing or whether it's marijuana or whether it's the opioid issue, and they want to weigh in on that. How would they do that in the current environment?
Well, right now what they do is they telephone in, and we hold them very much like you're doing this evening. They hold them in a waiting room, and they put their hand up, and when it becomes their time to speak, they can actually come through on the telephone. We've been able to bring the members of the administration and other people who wanted to testify. We've been able actually to bring them in like a Zoom call and have them in the room visually. It's,
so you make
everyone I'm sure has had kind of team meetings or Zoom calls.
Yeah.
We're all getting used to this new environment.
Yeah, and you're making provisions so the general public and your constituents can contact you, in session or in the committee hearings, because normally, and it may even provide more input, right? More interaction, because many people are not traveling to the State House for many reasons, even in normal times, but they may have more access. What do you think? What do you think about that? Do you think that there's going to be? I find that I'm talking to more people in a week because of these Zoom calls and because of this setup than I would normally.
I think it's more convenient. I mean, people don't have to travel to the State House. They don't have to find parking. They don't have to walk out. They don't have to wait. They can be at home cooking dinner, doing it with their children. And then when their time comes up, they get on, they make their testimony, and they're safe in their home.
Yeah, I think that it's got potential to even increase the interaction. I think that local town councils are operating. I mean, you were able to provide some level of the General Assembly that they could actually have these meetings without breaking open meeting law. So these rules committees that are currently beginning to start operating on the House side, that's going to make a big difference in terms of how they set up the rules, in terms of the interaction with the with the with the residents that you serve.
Yeah, for the public to be able to participate, I think that it's going to be the one of the few items that come out of the COVID pandemic that's going to be a little bit of a silver lining is going to be the actual public ability to become involved and actually have better access to the General Assembly. I think over the long term, as opposed to coming up and waiting until the middle of the night in the State House to testify on a bill.
Yeah, I could, I know that it's because of the backup that you have and the amount of people, and that there are times when those committee rooms, somebody might be in there 2 or 3 hours. This is a good way to kind of trigger that, so that they're in a waiting mode, but they're doing things that they need to get done in many ways. So I think that's got a lot of potential. It'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds. I know that just a medium like this, Jay, we've been able to work with and talk to hundreds of people more than we would normally do. So, and they're able to, connect with us, just like tonight. They could be texting you if they're a constituent of yours, and we'll share that back, to you. We've set up a Gmail account specifically for the COVID at ltgov20@gmail.com. And then we've also provided our phone number continuously, that people can call the 222-2371. And then they can talk to us about, hey, I'd like to talk to Rep. Edwards about something. I don't know how to get in touch with him. So we'll make that happen. Ben, you got something?
I do. I have a question. Shay told me to pop on and ask a question. And before I ask this question of people, I just want to remind everybody, that's what these shows are about. If you look at the bottom scroll, have questions, ask in the comments, need help, call the Lieutenant Governor's office. There's a special email. It's running there for the whole show. That's what, if you're new to these shows, that's what they're all about. And it's letting you talk to your representatives directly, and your leadership directly, and the people that can answer questions for you. We had a question from Christopher. Can we fix the loss of gaming revenue in Tiverton?
As a town administrator in Tiverton, yes. That is one of the items, and actually have talked to their solicitor about getting some legislation written for that, so that we can actually not take the huge hit that both Lincoln and Tiverton did. And so we have the issue where we can, if the casino closes for some reason, we'll actually have it prorated so that Tiverton gets the revenue that they are actually due. Yes, that is one of my personal priorities for the Tiverton. Thank you, Chris.
And a question for Senator Pearson. The agenda for some of the legislative goals for the Senate for this session.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So, one of the things that the Senate president was really excited about as we began the year is the Senate this year is starting off with 8 new members of the Senate. So there's only 38 members in the chamber, and we have 8 new senators. And so we've been able to really bring in a larger group of voices. And the Senate's also now 50% female. So we have some big changes going on in the Senate. And we've really come together around a new agenda for the Senate for this year, echoing on a lot of the same points that Rep. Edwards had mentioned earlier. But to give you, some of the big highlights, the president's really talked about tax equity, making sure that we have the Rhode Islanders who make the most, make sure they're pitching in and paying their fair share. We've talked about the minimum wage and really ensuring that we're on a pathway to 15, and especially keeping up with our neighbors in Massachusetts and Connecticut. Mm-hmm. We've also talked a lot about something I know near and dear to your heart, Governor, really figure out ways we can continue to support, especially our small business community through this pandemic and the economic crisis that it's caused on them. Another issue that we know we worked a lot together on is on education. We really believe in the Senate that equity in education across the entire state and every community is something we still have work to do, and we need to continue making sure that those opportunities are there for every student across our state. And also handling the basics, making sure that every Rhode Islander has access to good health care, which means codifying the Affordable Care Act into Rhode Island law. And really making sure that every Rhode Islander has access to health care. It couldn't be more important than a time like this during the pandemic. and also continuing to think about the future and working to address climate change. And so the president, majority leader, our whip, and our caucus have laid out a really bold agenda for 2021. And I know we're excited to get back to work. We'll be working very similar to the way the House is. So we're convening at Rhode Island College, again, in a very large auditorium that could fit many more. And there's only 38 of us senators and some staff there. We'll be doing remote committees as well, and to the points that both the rep and the governor had made around encouraging people to participate by that manner, we think is really great. We're getting, we'll have an opportunity to make it a lot easier for people to participate in the democratic process. And so we're excited to get to work through 2021 and sort of keep our state moving forward and move to recover from this pandemic.
Great. That's a good overview, Brian. And, all those things are going to be create lively conversation. So, the more people that kind of come in to the discussion, the better off we're going to be. On the small business issues, clearly, we got a challenge, and if we don't really pay attention to that in a real significant way, we could find ourselves on the short end of a lot of our budgets, both locally and statewide, because of the revenue that they do provide. And so, as we talk about, one of the things I'll be asking is, as we talk about increasing costs for businesses, say it's a minimum wage, whatever, it would be good if we could also find ways that we could decrease their workman's comp cost or these other things, and then everybody wins, right? If we were able to figure out how to lower costs, make the cost, then they could actually afford, to share in the, those additional costs. But those are all good programs, and I'm going to, certainly be looking differently this time around this year than in the past. But I do think it's really necessary to get back into session. And as I said, I do believe that our General Assembly, our local municipal leaders, our mayors, our town managers, they got really important work. And we need to make sure that they are safe in doing that work, just as we are with teachers and other people that we need out there. Let's get the vaccinations, but we got to get the supply up. We got to figure out a way to get the supply up, because they're trying to distribute what they have. But hopefully we're going to see, in DC, an administration that pays attention to this. The absence of that leadership has really cost us a lot, I think. And so I'm looking forward to kind of hearing more and more and more. And thank you so much, Rep. Edwards, for being here. I think, Ryan, you're going to stay on here, talk a little bit about budget. I know we fall asleep on budget, but that is so important. And having passed many budgets in the town of Cumberland and been responsible for managing them, I know how important that process is. And I want to make sure we share that with the general public, so they get an idea about maybe some of their ideas. Because, in fact, why don't you bring Rep. Abney on and join us? So Jay,
Governor, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, Jay, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. On the budgets, let's spend a few minutes on that. I mean, you got a process. I'll start with Chairman Abney. Ryan has been certainly involved with it, but Chairman Abney has the seniority on the budget chair. And so tell us a little bit about that budget process that happens, and then also some of the challenges that you see we're facing right now, for the state of Rhode Island as the chairman. And thank you for your leadership there too, Chairman.
That's okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to yield to Chairman Pearson. We're going back. We're piggybacking off each other, working together as a team. He's got the first half of what we're going to talk about, and I'll talk about the second half.
Great.
So, Ryan, if you would be so kind as to go through, I think we have some slides.
Yeah, happy to. And thanks, Ben, for bringing up those slides, and thanks, Chairman and Governor. Chairman Abney and I kind of just worked on a few things to give a couple of visuals for folks to understand. As the governor mentioned, sometimes when you talk about the budget, you can fall asleep. So we're going to try to put a couple things in front of some folks here and keep attention. Essentially the budget really breaks down to every year we have to pass a budget. And our fiscal year begins on July 1 and runs through June 30. So we don't, when we come up with our budget for the year, it's not like we budget for January 1st through the December 31st. We have a little bit of a different than the calendar year, and that's called our fiscal year. And we work on that as it comes through. One of the good things about state government is that it does require that we have a balanced budget. So, unlike the federal government, we can't run big budget deficits. We always need to make sure our budget is balanced. We do have a rainy day fund that we put money aside every year to make sure that if we do have a downturn or there is an economic issue, that we do have a rainy day to tap into to help us keep services funded. And we absolutely availed ourselves of that fund over the last budget and into this current one to really make sure that the services for Rhode Islanders were not impacted as our revenues really took a nosedive. And typically what happens when the Assembly comes back in session, we come back in session in January, and our sessions typically run through June. And there's always two budgets in play. So there's the current budget year, so the budget that would have run from July 1st, 2020 through June 30, 2021. And that's called the current budget, which we've already passed a budget for. But as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, more of the numbers become certain and they change. Certainly this year, we've seen a lot more change than's typical, but we typically manage that through what's called a supplemental budget. So we passed an original budget bill, and then we would do a supplemental budget bill. And so that's sort of the current year. And then before we leave in June for the year, we pass a budget that would carry us for the next fiscal year. And so that's generally the process that works as we come in to the session every year. Ben, if you could flip us to the second one. Yeah, so as I mentioned, those budgets, the calendar that gets you there really is never ending. So if you think about, we pass the final budget in June for the next year. The budget for the year after that actually starts being worked on right away in July. So as soon as we pass a budget for that year, so many of the executive departments and agencies actually begin worrying about the budget for the year off. And so in July, that sort of internal process starts within the administration. The budget office issues general directives to departments and agencies. Those department and agencies work throughout the fall and into the winter to be able to submit their budget recommendations to the governor. And then ultimately, in a normal year, the governor submits her budget to the General Assembly in January. And that is typically the beginning of the legislative review of the budget. For this fiscal year, because of all the changes were happening, the Congress acted just in December. We're expecting them to act again as soon as President-elect Biden is sworn in on some additional federal stimulus. We extended the deadline for the governor. Her budget is not now due until March of this year, which will likely be his budget, Governor McKee's budget, by the time that happens. But that process will really kick off the legislative review of the budget proposal from the governor. We typically then go through a series of hearings to hear all the different parts of the budget, hear from stakeholders across the board, and work to come up with a package and a budget that passed by June. And then Ben, if you can jump one more slide, just to give an idea of kind of how the budget breaks down. There's typically Article 1, which Article 1 is literally the line-by-line detail of the budget. It'll tell you, this department for this program, X dollars. And then the rest of the budget, Articles 2 through however many they are typically articles that require us to make a change in law to make the budget number in Article 1 come true. So a good example would be if we were going to expand the sales tax, there would be an article on the expansion of that sales tax that would delineate in law the tax. And then the outcome of that tax, how much we were expecting to get from it, would be showing up in Article 1 as sort of a revenue item. Ben, if you can flip one more slide for me. And one of the things that Chairman Abney and I wanted to make sure that we communicated to Rhode Islanders is really just where does all the money come from a budget? Historically, we've had a very large share of our budget that's actually federal money. So general revenue is money that we receive that's state funds, right? So things that we're doing, income taxes, lottery, corporate taxes, all those sorts of license fees. Those sorts of things are state general revenues. It's revenues that the state has dictated in law and we've collected. Federal funds is obviously money we get from the federal government. Other funds are things like university and college, tuitions, capital plan funds, et cetera, that are specifically dedicated for specific purposes. And then we have, certain things that we consider restricted receipts. So there are fees, there are fines, there are things that you pay, but they go to very specific uses and they can't be used for anything else. And that's really the difference of where the four sources of money come from. And then from there, we have to allocate that money to a series of expenses. The one interesting thing, if you sort of look at the bottom line of that chart on the total size of the budget, you can see that just from fiscal year 2020, only 2 budget years ago, right? So we were at 9.9 billion, and you can see as you look to the FY21 budget that we just passed, we're now over $12 billion. But when you look at the reason why, it's not, if you look at general revenue, you see that general revenue is, stayed pretty stable. It's gone kind of up and down a little bit, gone down obviously because of the pandemic, but you can see the big infusion of federal money. So you can see we went from, originally thinking we were going to have about $3.3 billion in federal revenue in this current budget year to having over $5.8 billion in federal revenue. And you might say, well, where is all that going? If you think about all of the money that's come into the state to pay for unemployment benefits, the extra $600 a week, direct payments to small businesses, all of those things that you've been seeing the government respond to, even though they're federal programs, they run through the state's budget. And that's really where you see these big numbers coming through and really just adding to the level of complexity that we have to work through as we sort out this current year's budget. And so this will obviously continue to move and shift as the environment does. I think, I've had the opportunity to serve in the Finance Committee for 8 years, and I know Chairman Abney, I think probably about the same amount of time in the House as well. And this is the most volatile budget and volatile collections I think we've ever seen in all of that time for obvious reasons. But Chairman Abney, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Chairperson. As you can see, and what's most important, the budget, and that's what I live with every day, it really is a significant policy document. It's really thick, but it is there for a reason. It is from the budget that we set all of the things we're going to do for the next year. For example, it sets the long-term infrastructure and priorities. Every governor, every state has his or her priorities, and it is through the budget that those priorities are done. That's why it's so important that what we do in our committees is to stay focused on what we're looking at, because if we try to personalize these budgets, they don't work because you have to have consensus with everybody else. Some states have another committee. You have the House and you have the Senate, and then they'll have another committee where they will meet differently to work things out. We don't have that. What we have is a good relationship with the House and the Senate in terms of getting these things done. But as you can see, if there are changes in tax policy, it can affect you really bad, or really good, depending on where your perspective is. And when you talk about, we have several hundred thousands of people in this state who rely on us as their safety net for certain things, and which includes Medicaid. So our budget is a document that helps us understand what our relationship to that is, and it's just so important. It also affects education. All states, in fact, are responsible for the education of their citizens. It's really not a federal responsibility as such, but as a policy document, we have to determine how much we want to spend on what kind of education and local aid. All of us live in cities and towns, and the locals rely on us a lot to make sure that I can get what I need in Newport or Middletown. We also have bills that are called standalone bills. I know people think that every single bill that comes into the legislature, particularly affects the budget. They all don't do that, but we do have standalone bills that do. If we make, for example, a change in the income tax or how it's calculated, that's a standalone bill usually, but it will affect what happens with the budget. And the most important thing to remember is that, as Chairman Pearson said, we have to have a balanced budget. We're not like the federal government. We cannot manufacture money. Other standalone bills, as you recall, I wasn't here when it happened, but pension reform, or we did any kind of work on that, or education and the funding formula. Those are bills that may not be in the budget, but they are bills that would affect how much money we would need for that. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay. We get an unbelievable number of bills every year that's referred to at least the Finance Committee outside for hearings, hundreds. And we spend a lot of time, just like the governor said, you know, sometimes we're in those hearing rooms for 3, 4, 5 hours at night when everyone else is gone, because we try to hear as many of those bills as possible. But again, things like tax law changes, changes to how the state pays providers for services. And one of the things we do is we try to make sure that we're solving big problems. And, you know, we have to be careful not to solve one problem and create another one. But that's all part of the budget. You hear sometimes our representatives say, oh, this is a good bill. Well, what does that really mean? Actually, the most important thing for me as a chairman, and I'm going into my 5th budget, is that great testimony, a good testimony from the sponsors and others, and I like to listen to both pro and con. It helps to know what a bill does, why it's being proposed, who's affected by it, how Rhode Island compares to other states. That's part of what I do at the national level, because I can see what other states are doing, and citation for any data that's presented. The best testimony, if you remember nothing from this community conversation, is that if you have to come up and testify, it's better to send us a lot of, we don't have time to read a lot of dissertations, but if you testify from the heart, and if you say what you really feel, that lets us know what our constituents really feel. Next slide, please. So that's what I mean by what's a good bill. Ideally, it solves an identified problem. We have to make sure that we're all looking at what we think is the same problem without creating a new one. And most of all, the bills that we pass, remember, we work on a consensus basis. It has to have broad support that you can go back and explain it to your constituents. That is so important. I know everybody has single bills. I know what happens when the budget is passed. The budget is this thick. Everybody goes to page 1,295, find the line that they're looking for their interest, not realizing that's part of thousands of pages sometimes of information that we've had to put together to make a budget work for everyone. So while it seems like it's just a one bill, it is, as the new governor will find out, that is the operating document that most of the things we need to get done. And we get that done by listening to you. And finally, as Jay was saying, the one thing that we're learning to use is the technology that we have in order to listen to people testify. And we will usually have our meetings in our room 35, but we've gotten pretty good at having people come in remotely. And just make sure you have a structure so that you can hear what they say, they can hear what you say, because it does work. We really do listen. And when we listen, we come out with a product that the last 4 times that I've done it, people have said, you know what? I didn't get every single thing I wanted, but I understand why I didn't get it. And they just keep trying until they do get it. So I think that's a short synopsis of how we do it. And we certainly work with the Senate to make sure that we're on as much of the same sheet of music as we can.
Yeah, so thank you for doing that. I have my own little problems here, but can you hear me?
We can.
I can hear you.
I got a new computer in my office, and I've been trying to get the video on, and I guess I've got it on. It's a little bit different right now, but we'll figure it out. But yeah, so both chairmen, this is a a complicated process, and I just wanted to have people kind of see that there's a lot of in-depth work that's been done on budgets, and they're not just like you say, Rep. Abney. Well, I'll go to my line item and then close the document. And those are working documents, and he's got the both sides of the equation. You got the income, you got the expense, and if one gets reduced, then one of them has a problem, and if one of them gets increased, then the other side's got a problem, and it moves that way. So I want to just thank you for both for coming on. We'll kind of touch back with you about this work and then how this budget unfolds. And I am optimistic, as Jonathan, as Rep. Edwards said. What I'm reading is that with the change of administration, and rightfully so, not only do the small businesses need help, but states need help as well as local communities. And I'm very hopeful, and we're going to have a good amount of information that will come our way, and we'll share that in terms of it's going to be definitely a working document. There's no question about that as we proceed. I may be asking for a day advance on the March 10th that was set up because I think I want to have maybe about, who knows, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on when the confirmation happens. But then, do you have something for the chairman?
I do. I have one question. Also, I love the new computer. The camera's over to the side, but you're looking at it's an interesting.
How about
Can
that?
you move the camera? Yeah.
Oh yeah, you'll have to walk me through this. Bear with me.
I'm so excited. I'm excited for our tech meeting this week.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a question. With the budget going up 25% in the last 2 years, how much is being plugged in with federal COVID money, one-time fixes? Is there a plan to resulting structural deficit?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As Ryan was said, the budget, it looks like it, and I get the question all the time, but it looks like it got much bigger than it normally would have. And that was due to a lot of federal money that was coming in at the time. So that's not normal that we would have a budget that's that big. But in terms of, it's a good question in terms of how to handle a structural deficit that my good friend, the governor, will be responsible for working with. As you heard, there are a lot of philosophies about how to get things going in Rhode Island. Should we raise taxes? Should we not? Should we support this initiative? Should we support that one? We've got, when you're talking about a $533 million prospective budget deficit, there are just a lot of things we're not going to be able to do all at once. And so the way you get a deficit down, a structural deficit down, is you certainly don't do it by borrowing when you don't need to borrow. You don't do it by raising taxes if you don't have to do that. And you have to not do some of the things that you thought you could do. But most of all, you have to take a look and see, is there money that is in the system that's not being used, but it's there? And we have what we used to do in the military, have a little empire building. One particular department would have money that's not spent, but will continually ask. We're going to be looking very close at that as we do every year, because I do think we have enough money sometimes that's there that obviously doesn't end up being used because of timing, contracts, things of that sort. So we have to look. Everything has to be on the table in order to bring this deficit down, but you can't do it just by simply doing one thing. That's what I think we have to, that if you take away nothing else, there's no one thing that's going to change it. And we have to get away from what our political party says, what our what we think about spending money. You cannot get rid of a deficit by continually going into debt. On the other hand, if you do go into debt, you have to actually use the money to get the return of the investment on. It's a complicated question, but that's my view.
Yeah. So I agree with Chairman Abbey, and I would just add that I think one of the things that we've definitely seen this year is we've seen our spending go up, but we've seen it go up for things that hopefully we're not spending money on. Towards the end of this year, next year, right? We don't want to be spending money on increase unemployment insurance because we want people back at work. We don't want to be spending money on, contact tracing and other things because we want this pandemic to have recovered. So, those are the things that while we've seen in the revenue go up, we're looking that the expenses should go down as well for a lot of where those one-time federal monies went to help us sort of manage the pandemic and the fallout from it. And of course, there's as the chairman mentioned, there's always going to be a remaining gap to solve. and we're going to be working, very closely and looking again under every rock and every opportunity to try to make sure that we, have a balanced budget that is not just balanced, but is responsible. And as I mentioned earlier, a budget that cares for Rhode Islanders today, but invests in them in the future. And that's a big lens that I think we always need to keep is, whatever we do today, how is that setting us up for the future? And how is that, the Great Recession, one of the things Massachusetts did, they doubled down on investing in education. And their workforce is, getting the benefits of that, of being prepared. And that's helped their economy. So how are we making sure that even in these tough times, we're continuing to invest in things like education, like infrastructure, like healthcare? Those are the really important things that we need to be making sure we're sticking to our investments there and driving us to a better outcome in the end.
We're going to leave it there because I'd like to get, the oversight in. I think that Rep. Serper is still around and Senator Palmer. Thank you so much, both of your chairs, and, looking forward to working with you. And those are challenging items. And, government budgets like municipal budgets, they're not business budgets. They're meant to balance either side. There's not a profit that you build into them as you're within the business. And that makes it actually a lot more challenging to a lot of degree because you really are trying to balance it out, being fair with the taxpayers, not taxing any more than you need, but taxing what you do need to make sure that, the outcomes are positive for the state of Rhode Island. And it's a positive growth strategy that we need. So thank you for both of you being here and spending the time with us tonight. And I'm experimenting with a new computer here. So I think that I might have a better system set up than I had before. I was running out of the battery on this thing. This thing hooked up with a speaker of some sort, and then that wasn't good. But anyways, thanks for being here. Looking forward to working with you.
Thanks for having us.
Do you need any money to get new equipment for your house? Just checking.
I'm thinking about getting you air conditioning so that you can get the job done. And
That's right.
That's what I'm thinking about right now.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know whether Senator Palmer stayed with us, Ben, or Rep. Serper, or whether they are. Great. So I'm glad we're spending another 5-10 minutes if you have the time. I know that budget went a little over, but, it was worth sharing. So give us a little bit of, again, I'll defer to Rep. Serper as being the senior chairperson of the oversight. Give us a little overview on that, and then we'll have Lou go in there for a few minutes, and then we'll call it a night. But thank you so much for spending the time here tonight with us.
Absolutely.
Am I on now? You can hear me.
Yes, I can.
And I think we all agree that the budget is the most important document that government produces, but people want government to work for them. And when I was assigned to the Oversight Committee, I told the then speaker that my goal and my mission was to see and hear from constituents and others what were the impediments to making government not work for the people. And it's frustrating. Government should be there to serve our constituents. We are there to be the liaison, I think, to government, but government should be there to serve our constituents. And during the first couple of years, we began with the Division of Taxation. They had a new computer system in place. They had the fraud alert set too high, they said in a meeting, and people weren't getting their income tax refunds. They needed it to pay bills. And of course, this is pre-pandemic. And pre this bad economy, they needed it to pay bills. They wanted to go on vacation. College kids needed it to pay tuition. So we had them in, and I nicely asked them to fix their fraud alert so people could get their money. I mean, those people should not be suffering waiting for cash because we have a computer system, and I'll get to that again, that doesn't work. And then the Oversight Committee, and I think Senator Palmer, you were at least on the Oversight Committee in the Senate, I'm not sure, but then we got hit almost simultaneously with the UHIP debacle. And we have about a third of the residents in this state receiving some kind of assistance, whether it's EBT, with more unofficially called food stamps. We have young single mothers getting some daycare assistance, which enables them to work and not be as dependent upon government services. We have elders that need help, the whole gamut. We instituted a new computer system that nobody said was ready. The federal government said it wasn't ready. The people on the inside wasn't ready. But for reasons that are still unclear to me, the system was launched anyway, and that devolved into a disaster of biblical proportions. And it took months, if not a year or more, to get into working order because we launched a computer system that wasn't ready. In our haste to try to save money, it ended up costing money. And, we imposed fines on the computer company, but that didn't make up for the inconvenience and the hunger and the waiting for food that families had to endure. And I sympathize with them. Again, government doesn't work, so who suffers? But it's the constituents. And then we had another problem with another company we contracted with, MTM. They provide the transportation services for non-medical emergencies for our citizens. And again, we had a problem with that contract. And I could go on and enumerate all of the contracts, but I know time is short. So in a nutshell, my goal is to ferret out the problems and the initiatives that just don't work, that cause government to be an impediment to citizens. And because of separation of powers, and Governor, I do want to work closely with you once you're firmly in place. I mean, I have some ideas of how to make things better, but because of separation of powers, I can't tell you what to do. You're the executive branch, we're the legislative branch, but I do have some ideas that I would like to share with you for your consideration that will help make government work for people. So I just hope that you'll have an open ear for that when the time comes.
Yeah, so Chairman, I agree with you, and we've been in out of the Lieutenant Governor's office, we've been certainly working with individuals that you've been helping. So, and I think that we can, the whole idea is to make the prevention, and then when you get into trouble, get out of it as quickly as you can.
Yes.
Hopefully that, we'll be able to figure that out because, the less problems you have brought in front of you, the more work you can do to kind of make things, to really improve on current situations that can be improved, but are working okay, but they still can be improved. So that's where the direction you want to get to. The preventative strategy is where you want to be. So, and it takes it takes a lot of work to do that. To do your best. I've been telling our staff every morning. We've had 9 o'clock meetings every morning since COVID hit, even though we're not in the building. I said, look, to do your best is real hard work. So, all we can do is try to do our best. So, yeah, we'll definitely be connected in. And thanks for being here, Chairman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Chairman DePalma, you're kind of in a new category, although you have had some experience on oversight. And but tell us some of the things that are front and center on your side of the aisle.
Absolutely, Governor. I previously, as the Chairwoman Serpent indicated, I previously served on oversight for 2 years. It was a bunch of years ago, but so I'm not unfamiliar with oversight. But I won't reiterate what Chairwoman Serpent. I'll try and build upon that. So we look at legislators as what bill are you going to pass? What law are you going to change? That's important, but I think the work of oversight is more important. It's more critical. I say it's the surveillance, it's the vigilance of the laws that have been passed, or the organizations that are in place, or the projects that are run, as Chairwoman Serpent indicated, to make certain they're meeting their commitments, meeting their requirements. So there's several that, in fact, we're kicking off next Wednesday. So, by the way, Governor, before I go on, great camera you have, much better than what you had before. So,
much better. I'm improving already.
I'd stop now. I'd be done. It's much clearer. It's great. It's well done. So good improvement on the technology.
Well, from the engineer, that's a good compliment.
Ben's doing a great. It's much better. It's good. I mean, not only good. It's great. So we're having a hearing next week. But the one thing to think about from a oversight perspective, because it was separation of powers, began in the early 2000s. Prior to separation of powers, and what that means for the general public is representatives and senators were served on all of the boards and all the quasi-public agencies, whether it's the Narragansett Bay Commission, whether it's Rhode Island Resource Recovery, whether it's the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, you name it. There's about 20 to 21 or 22 of those that exist out there. There's a lot of them. Now that we don't have reps and senators on any longer, the only way we have to ensure that they're meeting their commitments is to do oversight, as oversight hearings. So the three we have planned on the Senate side, and one is already planned and scheduled for next week, has to do with the Health Services Council / Hospital Conversion Act. And that's got a lot of press recently with regards to the for-profit hospitals and charter care. Another one that we're going to be looking at subsequent to that, and one that'll be near and dear to your heart, Governor, has to do with the expenditure of the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Where did they go? Who got what? How do we do? All those kinds of things, especially in light of the next tranche of relief or stimulus that's going to come, and maybe the other one after that. Let's ensure we have the right things in place and the right kinds of reporting, and we know some of the challenges we saw there. The third one that we're looking at, going to go forward with, is the 2020 election process. What did we learn from that? What do we need to improve? Because the 2022 election is a year, 18 months away. We're not going to be able to affect anything for the March election for the bonds, but that's part of it. So the general public should have confidence that oversight, while it's not, the Oversight Committee will see some bills. In the case of line item veto, that's the bills that have come to oversight before, Inspector General bills, and looking at bills in the past that have come through the Oversight Committee on the Senate side. But that's where we're going to be doing this surveillance and vigilance of state government, projects in state government, and the quasi-public agencies that operate and are critical to the operation of state government.
And both of you, both chair people, Chairwoman Sripper and Chairman De Palma, that's a place where people can go. People are looking to go. Sometimes there might be some things that are happening, and you don't know. I know as a mayor, we didn't have the oversight, but we certainly had an open chamber, an open door, and if we had a smell of a sewer problem in our community and we needed to get to Narragansett Bay, and you call the meeting and you bring Narragansett Bay in, you say, hey, we got a problem here, and then they solve it. That's how you get things done. And so, I always said, that it's very important that people understand that if they have an issue that they think is a problem, it makes sense to bring it forward and bring it attention, and then try to figure out the resolution of that, and then try to get ahead of the problem. But if you're not ahead of the problem, say, hey, I gotta do better. So I think that's important for people to hear, that if there's a state issue, and sometimes they might think it's a state issue, but they've got to go to the local, or maybe it's not even in the purview of the General Assembly. They have to go to our office or whatever it might be, in terms of Lieutenant Governor's office or the Governor's office, or it may go to one of the quasi boards but they need direction on where to get to. So thanks. I want to thank you both for spending the time tonight, and we went a little over, but I think that sharing this information, we hit 2 or 3 people. Oh my God. How does this happen? Am I still here, you think, or what? My camera. My camera is, and now I'm gone. So anyway, I'll end up by just saying thank you, and we'll be in touch. And Chairman Sripper, we'll definitely give you a call and sit down and talk about how you can improve things. Always looking forward to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay. Anyways, my camera's down, Ben. It is a little bit confusing, but stick with me here a little bit. Maybe we can figure out how to get it going. But I'll just kind of sign off. We're a little late as it is. And we appreciate the fact that you've been able to help us.
Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna we're gonna get you good. I think that the new computer probably I think that the new computer probably went to sleep, but you're still on with us. So
I am.
Yeah, everything will be good for Tuesday.
Let me just try this one more time and see if I can get the. Oh my God.
We're still on.
We're still on the show.
We're still on the show. Say goodnight to everybody.
Good night, everybody. I will try to get my camera back sooner or later, but this is the pleasures of the COVID-19 and all the computer stuff that we have to deal with. But we're making progress. Good night.